My name is Lynn, and at 32 years old, I thought I had finally found my soulmate in Trevor. Our romance was picture perfect. Our wedding was beautiful, and I was ready for our happily ever after. But everything changed the moment we became husband and wife. My new husband suddenly refused all physical contact with me. Not a single touch, kiss, or intimate moment. When I finally confronted him after 6 weeks of rejection, his words cut deep. My body is my choice. You can't demand anything from me. I was devastated and confused. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, completely let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. Before I met Trevor, my life was focused primarily on my career. I had worked my way up to become a marketing executive at one of Seattle's top advertising firms. The job was demanding but rewarding, and I had built a reputation for my creative campaigns and ability to connect with clients. But my dating life had been a series of disappointments. There were relationships that fizzled out after a few months, men who weren't looking for commitment, and a particularly painful breakup with a guy who had been cheating on me for most of our 2-year relationship. After that heartbreak, I took a year off from dating. I focused on myself, my friends, and my career. I wasn't actively looking for anyone when my friend Natalie insisted I come to a dinner party at her place. "You've been hiding away too long," she told me. "Just come eat good food and talk to actual humans who aren't your coworkers." That's where I met Trevor Anderson. He was 34 tall, with warm brown eyes and a smile that lit up his whole face. What struck me immediately was how attentive he was. In a group conversation, he actually listened instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. When I talked about a challenging campaign I was working on, he asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in my perspective. Unlike other men I'd dated who tried to rush physical intimacy, Trevor took things slow. Our first date was at a small art gallery featuring local artists, followed by coffee at a quiet cafe where we talked for hours. He remembered details about my work, my family, and my interests that I'd mentioned at the dinner party. It felt refreshing to be with someone who paid attention. "I've been on too many dates where people are just going through the motions," Trevor told me on our third day to hike through Discovery Park. "I want to really know the person I'm with." Trevor worked as a financial analyst for a bank downtown. He was divorced, something he was upfront about early on. "It's been 3 years," he explained. "We married young and grew apart. No drama, just two people who realized they wanted different things." I appreciated his honesty and the mature way he spoke about his past. Our relationship developed naturally over 6 months. We enjoyed trying new restaurants, going to concerts, and spending quiet evenings cooking together at his place or mine. The physical side of our relationship progressed gradually, which I found respectful and endearing. There was no pressure, just a growing connection that felt right. What I loved most about Trevor was his attentiveness. He remembered my coffee order, sent me texts during stressful workdays to check in, and once surprised me by organizing a small birthday gathering with my closest friends. "You mentioned once that you never had surprise parties growing up," he said, when I asked how he knew to plan it. "I thought you deserved to experience that joy." When Trevor proposed, we were at our favorite spot in Mount Rainier National Park overlooking a stunning valley. The hike had been his idea, and I had no clue what he was planning. As we sat on a rock enjoying the view, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. "Lynn, meeting you changed everything for me. I never thought I'd find someone who makes me feel this complete," he said, pulling a small box from his backpack. "Would you make me the happiest man alive and marry me?" The ring was perfect, a vintage-style emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds. Later, he told me he had chosen emerald because I once mentioned it was my grandmother's favorite stone and reminded me of her. That's how attentive Trevor was, or at least how attentive I thought he was. I said yes through happy tears, and we spent the rest of the day in a bubble of joy, making plans and dreaming about our future together. When we called our families that evening, everyone was thrilled. My parents, who had been hesitant about my previous boyfriends, had warmed to Trevor after meeting him at Thanksgiving. "He's a good one," Linny, my dad, had said. "He looks at you the right way." The wedding planning process was surprisingly smooth. Trevor was involved in every decision, from the venue to the menu to the music. We decided on a smaller ceremony with about 60 guests, mostly close friends and family. I found a beautiful venue, a restored historic building with exposed brick walls and huge windows overlooking the Seattle skyline. "I don't need a huge wedding," Trevor said when we discussed our budget. "I just need you and the people who matter most to us." My sister Jillian was my maid of honor, and Trevor's college roommate Paul served as his best man. The ceremony was everything I had hoped for, personal and emotional. We wrote our own vows, and I remember getting choked up as Trevor promised to honor and cherish you every day, to be your partner in all of life's adventures, and to build a home with you filled with laughter and love. The reception was filled with dancing, heartfelt toasts, and so much joy. As Trevor and I swayed to our first dance, I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. I had found my person. Someone who knew me, respected me, and loved me. Or so I thought. We had booked a beautiful suite at a hotel downtown for our wedding night. After the reception, we changed out of our wedding clothes and headed there, both tired but happy. And that's when everything changed. That's when the man I thought I knew disappeared and a stranger took his place. When we arrived at our hotel suite after the reception, I expected romance, champagne, and the beginning of our life together. The room was beautiful, with rose petals scattered on the king-sized bed and a bottle of champagne chilling in an ice bucket. I was exhausted, but happy, riding the emotional high of what had been the perfect day. Trevor set our bags down and immediately said, "I'm gonna take a shower. I'm completely wiped out." "Do you want company?" I asked playfully. His expression changed so quickly it startled me. "Actually, I just need some space." The day was overwhelming. I tried not to feel hurt. It had been a long, emotional day, and I understood being tired. So I changed into the special lingerie I had bought for our wedding night and waited for him. When Trevor emerged from the bathroom 30 minutes later, he was fully dressed in pajama pants and a t-shirt. He barely looked at me before climbing into bed. "Trevor," I said, confused by his behavior. "I'm really tired, Lynn. Let's just get some sleep." I lay beside him, feeling a strange distance I couldn't explain. I told myself he was just exhausted. Planning a wedding while working full-time had been stressful for both of us. Surely tomorrow things would return to normal. But they didn't. The next morning, Trevor was up early, checking his phone and mentioning a work email he needed to respond to. When I tried to cuddle up to him, he subtly shifted away. When I tried to kiss him, he turned so my lips landed on his cheek instead of his mouth. Our honeymoon wasn't scheduled until 3 weeks after the wedding, due to a big project I needed to complete at work. We had planned to spend those weeks settling into Trevor's apartment, which was larger than mine. But as the first week of marriage progressed, the distance between us only grew. Trevor began staying late at work, claiming a new project needed his attention. He started sleeping on the couch, saying he didn't want to disturb me when he came home late. When he was home, he was physically present but emotionally distant, spending hours on his phone or laptop, barely engaging in conversation. At first, I made excuses for him. Maybe the reality of marriage was hitting him differently than it was hitting me. Maybe he was dealing with work stress he hadn't shared yet. Maybe he needed time to adjust to living together full-time, though we had practically been living together for months before the wedding. By the end of the first week, I couldn't ignore the obvious anymore. My husband was avoiding physical contact with me. Not just sexual intimacy, but any touch at all. If I reached for his hand, he would find a reason to move away. If I sat next to him on the couch, he would get up to get a drink or check something in another room. The man who had been so physically affectionate during our dating relationship now seemed repulsed by my touch. I started questioning myself. Had I done something wrong? Had I changed somehow? I examined my behavior, my appearance, trying to identify what might have triggered this sudden shift. I even bought new clothes, and spent extra time on my hair and makeup, hoping to rekindle whatever had been lost. But nothing changed. During the second week, I tried to talk to him about it. "Trevor, is everything okay? You seem distant lately." "Everything's fine," he replied, without looking up from his phone. "Just busy with work." "It feels like more than that. You barely look at me anymore. You never touch me." He finally met my eyes, his expression unreadable. "You're overthinking things. I'm just adjusting to married life." I reached out to my friend Natalie, the one who had introduced us, to ask if she had noticed anything different about Trevor at our wedding. "He seemed happy," she said. "Maybe a little nervous, but that's normal, right? Give him some time, Lynn. Marriage is a big change even when you're sure about it." I tried to follow her advice. I gave him space. I tried to be understanding. I focused on work and setting up our home, hoping that normalcy and routine would help ease whatever was troubling him. But as the third week passed, and then the fourth, the situation only worsened. Trevor started coming home later and later. Some nights he didn't come home at all, claiming he had fallen asleep at the office while working late. We had to cancel our honeymoon because Trevor suddenly couldn't get time off work. The project that had seemed manageable before the wedding was now apparently all-consuming. I felt like I was living with a ghost. The apartment was filled with our things, wedding gifts, still half unpacked, but the warmth that should have filled our new home was absent. The man I married had disappeared, leaving behind a cold, distant stranger who seemed to want nothing to do with me. By the fifth week, I was barely sleeping, constantly anxious and fighting back tears throughout the day. My colleagues noticed my distraction at work. My sister Jillian called, more frequently concerned about my subdued tone during our conversations. "Something isn't right, Jill," I finally admitted during one of our calls. "Trevor hasn't touched me since before the wedding. Not even a hug or holding hands. It's like he's repulsed by me." "That doesn't sound like the Trevor we all met," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Have you tried talking to him directly about it?" I had tried multiple times, but Trevor always deflected, changed the subject, or simply walked away. But Jillian was right. I needed to confront this head-on. After 6 weeks of emotional distance and physical avoidance, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided it was time for a real conversation, one that Trevor couldn't walk away from. I needed answers, even if they were painful to hear. I planned to cook his favorite meal, open a bottle of wine, and create a setting where we could talk openly. I texted him that morning. "Let's have dinner together tonight. I'm cooking. Please be home by 7. He responded with a simple "okay," which was more response than I usually got these days. That evening, I prepared for a conversation that would either begin to heal our relationship or confirm my growing fear that I had made a terrible mistake. I spent the entire day preparing for that evening. I left work early to shop for ingredients, cleaned our apartment, and spent hours cooking Trevor's favorite meal, beef bourguignon. I set the table with our wedding china, lit candles, and opened a bottle of red wine to breathe. I even changed into a dress Trevor had once said he loved on me. When 7 o'clock came and went with no sign of him, I wasn't surprised. I texted him, "Dinner's ready. Are you on your way?" 20 minutes later, he replied, "Running late. Start without me." I didn't start without him. I sat at our beautifully set table watching the candles burn down and the food get cold. At 8:30, I heard his key in the door. Trevor walked in, his expression changing from neutral to guarded when he saw the scene I had set. "Sorry I'm late," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Work was crazy today." "It's fine," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can reheat everything." He nodded and disappeared into the bedroom to change. When he returned, I had plated our food and refreshed our wine glasses. Trevor sat across from me, immediately reaching for his wine glass and taking a long sip. "This looks great," he said, though his tone lacked enthusiasm. We ate in uncomfortable silence for a few minutes. I pushed my food around my plate, my appetite gone. Finally, I set my fork down and took a deep breath. "Trevor, we need to talk about what's happening between us." He continued, eating eyes on his plate. What do you mean? I mean that you haven't touched me since our wedding day. Not a kiss, not a hug, nothing. You sleep on the couch or come home so late I'm already asleep. When I try to touch you, you pull away. I need to know what's going on. Trevor set his fork down and leaned back in his chair, his face expressionless. Nothing's going on. I've just been busy and stressed. For 6 weeks, so stressed that you can't even hold my hand. This isn't just about sex, Trevor. It's about any form of physical contact. It's like you're repulsed by me. You're being dramatic, he said dismissively. My frustration rose. I'm not being dramatic. I'm describing exactly what's happening. We haven't consummated our marriage, Trevor. Not once in 6 weeks. That's not normal. He looked at me directly then, his eyes cold. So that's what this is about, sex. You feel entitled to my body just because we're married. His words felt like a slap. What? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. It sounds exactly like what you're saying. My body is my choice, Lynn. You can't demand physical intimacy from me. That's not how consent works. I stared at him in shock. Trevor, I would never demand anything from you. I'm talking about the complete absence of physical affection from someone who used to be very affectionate. I'm talking about the fact that something obviously changed the moment we got married, and you won't talk to me about it. Nothing changed, he insisted. I'm just not in the mood lately. You're being controlling and demanding. Controlling, I repeated incredulously. How is asking my husband why he won't touch me controlling? Because you're making me feel pressured and guilted into physical contact I don't want right now. I felt tears welling in my eyes. Did something happen? Did I do something wrong? Please, Trevor, help me understand. Nothing happened, he said, his voice flat. You need to accept that marriage doesn't mean automatic access to someone's body. You can't force intimacy. I don't want to force anything. I want to understand why the man who couldn't keep his hands off me before our wedding now acts like touching me is repulsive. I want to understand what changed. Nothing changed, he repeated, standing up abruptly. I'm just not feeling it right now, and you need to respect that instead of trying to make me feel guilty about it. Trevor walked away from the table and grabbed his jacket. Where are you going? I asked, my voice breaking. Out. I need some air. This conversation is going nowhere. And just like that, he left. I sat alone at our table, surrounded by the remnants of the dinner I had prepared with such hope. The candles had burned low wax, dripping onto our wedding china. I felt hollow inside, completely lost. I cleaned up mechanically, wrapping leftovers and washing dishes through a blur of tears. Was I wrong to expect physical affection from my husband? Was I really being controlling by asking for an explanation? The confidence I had felt earlier crumbled into self-doubt. Later that night, I lay in our bed alone, replaying our conversation and trying to make sense of Trevor's reactions. His words about consent and bodily autonomy weren't wrong in principle, but they felt weaponized, somehow used to deflect from the real issue. There was something, he wasn't telling me something, that had changed his feelings toward me. Around midnight, I heard the apartment door open and close. Trevor's footsteps moved around the living room, but he didn't come to the bedroom. I heard the familiar sound of the couch creaking as he settled in for another night away from me. I cried myself to sleep that night, feeling more alone than I ever had. The man sleeping in the next room was a stranger to me now. Worse than a stranger, he was someone who had made me believe in a connection that apparently didn't exist. The next morning, I woke early after a restless night. Trevor was still asleep on the couch when I left for work. I went through my day in a fog, unable to focus on anything. By afternoon, I had made a decision. I would give Trevor one more chance to explain what was happening. If he couldn't or wouldn't, I needed to consider what that meant for our future. When I arrived home that evening, Trevor wasn't there. I changed into comfortable clothes and sat on the couch waiting. Hours passed with no word from him. Around 9 o'clock, I heard my phone buzz with a text. working late, don't wait up. Anger and hurt swirled inside me. Was this how our marriage would be? Him avoiding me, refusing to address the growing chasm between us? I paced our apartment feeling trapped and helpless. In the bedroom, Trevor's phone charger caught my eye. He had left in such a hurry that morning that his phone was still plugged in on his nightstand. I stood there, staring at it, feeling a moral debate rage inside me. I had never been the type to snoop through someone's private communications. I believed in trust and respect. But was it still an invasion of privacy when the other person was clearly hiding something that was destroying your relationship? After several minutes of internal struggle, I made my choice. I needed answers, and if Trevor wouldn't give them to me, perhaps his phone would. With trembling hands, I picked up Trevor's phone. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the screen. Did I really want to do this? Was I crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed? But then I thought about the 6 weeks of rejection, the dismissive way he had responded to my concerns, and the growing certainty that he was hiding something from me. I needed to know the truth. Thankfully, I knew his passcode. Trevor had given it to me months ago when we started getting serious, a gesture of trust that now felt ironic. I entered the numbers and the phone unlocked, revealing his home screen. I took a deep breath and opened his text messages. The first thing I noticed was a conversation thread with someone named Amanda. The name was familiar, but it took me a moment to place it. Amanda was Trevor's ex-wife. He had mentioned her a few times during our relationship, always in neutral terms. According to Trevor, they had parted amicably after realizing they wanted different things in life. The most recent message from Amanda had come in just an hour ago. Any update? Is she suspicious yet? With a growing sense of dread, I scrolled up to see the conversation history. What I found made my blood run cold. Wedding went as planned. She doesn't suspect anything Trevor had texted the day after our wedding. Good. Remember, don't consummate the marriage. That's crucial for the annulment strategy, Amanda had replied. I know the plan. No physical contact at all. It's harder than I thought it would be, though. She keeps trying to initiate. Stay strong. Just 6 months of this act, then we file for divorce, split her assets, and you're free. The messages continued detailing a calculated plan that made me physically ill. Trevor had married me with the explicit intention of divorcing me after establishing legal rights to my property and savings. The plan had apparently been hatched with Amanda, who wasn't an amicable ex at all, but a current partner in this scheme. Her family has money, right? Amanda had asked in one message. Not directly accessible, but she makes good money and has a trust fund that becomes part of marital assets. After 6 months, Trevor had replied. I kept scrolling, each message more devastating than the last. Trevor detailed how he was purposely creating distance, making me feel like I was the problem, gaslighting me into doubting myself. He and Amanda laughed about my confusion and pain. She made a special dinner tonight to talk about our issues, read a message from just hours ago. Had to get out of there before I gave something away. Smart move, Amanda had replied. Don't let her manipulate you into physical contact. That could ruin everything. The final message from Trevor before he left his phone behind. She's so desperate for affection, it's almost too easy. Using the "my body, my choice" line was brilliant. Now she thinks she's being abusive by even asking questions. I sat on the edge of our bed, phone clutched in my shaking hands, trying to process what I was reading. The man I had married, the man I had loved and trusted, had never loved me at all. Our entire relationship had been a calculated fraud designed to gain access to my finances. The thoughtfulness, the attentiveness, the love I thought we shared, it was all an act. The sound of keys in the door jolted me back to the present. I heard Trevor enter the apartment and call out my name. In that moment, a strange calm washed over me. I walked out of the bedroom, still holding his phone. Trevor's eyes immediately fixed on it, widening in recognition. What are you doing with my phone? He demanded. I know everything, Trevor, I said. my voice steadier than I expected. I know about you and Amanda. I know about your plan. His expression shifted rapidly from anger to denial. What are you talking about? Give me my phone. I held it up screen facing him, showing the incriminating text thread. It's all here. The wedding scam, the plan for divorce after 6 months, the way you've been deliberately manipulating me. How could you do this? For a moment, Trevor seemed genuinely speechless. Then his expression hardened. You had no right to go through my private messages. That's an invasion of privacy. That's what you're concerned about right now, privacy. I let out a hollow laugh. You've been planning to defraud me from the beginning. Our entire relationship was a lie. You're misinterpreting things, he said, his tone suddenly placating. Those messages aren't what they look like. Amanda and I are just friends now. We joke around sometimes in ways that might seem inappropriate, but it's not serious. Stop lying, I said, feeling rage building inside me. It's all here in black and white. The annulment strategy. The plan to divorce me after 6 months and take half of everything I own. You even discussed my trust fund. Trevor's face changed again, his eyes calculating. Lynn, baby, let's talk about this. I can explain everything. There's nothing to explain. I read it all. You never loved me. This was all a con from the beginning. Trevor took a step toward me, hand outstretched. Give me my phone and let's discuss this like adults. No, I said, firmly stepping back. I'm leaving. I can't stay here tonight. This is your home too, Trevor said, his voice softening in a way that once would have seemed caring, but now felt manipulative. Don't leave. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I repeated. I walked past him to the closet and pulled out an overnight bag. I'm going to my sister's place. Don't try to contact me. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Trevor's demeanor changed instantly. Your lawyer. Don't be ridiculous. You're overreacting to a few text messages. I ignored him as I packed some essentials, my mind racing but focused. When I had what I needed, I turned to face him one last time. You know what's ironic, Trevor? You kept saying my body, my choice, to manipulate me into feeling guilty about wanting physical affection from my husband. But you never respected my choices at all. You lied to me from the beginning to get access to my money. You married me under false pretenses. That's fraud. Trevor's face darkened. No one will believe you. It will be your word against mine. I held up his phone. Not anymore. I forwarded these messages to my email. All of them. The look of shock on his face gave me a small moment of satisfaction as I walked out the door. I called Jillian from the elevator, my voice finally breaking as I told her I needed a place to stay. She didn't ask questions, just gave me her address and said she'd wait up. As I drove to my sister's place, the full weight of what had happened began to hit me. My marriage was a fraud. The man I loved had never existed. I had been played for a fool, targeted for my financial assets. The humiliation and betrayal felt unbearable. But beneath the pain, something else was emerging. Anger, determination, a resolve not to let Trevor and Amanda get away with what they had done. By the time I arrived at Jillian's apartment, I had stopped crying. I had a plan. I need a good lawyer, were the first words I said when Jillian opened her door. Her eyes widened at my expression. Come in and tell me everything. And I did. Every painful detail of Trevor's betrayal, every text message I had read. Jillian listened in horror, then pulled out her laptop. My friend Sophia is a family law attorney, she said, already typing an email. She's the best in the city. We'll call her first thing tomorrow morning. That night, as I lay on Jillian's couch, unable to sleep, I realized something important. Trevor and Amanda had underestimated me. They thought I would be too devastated, too embarrassed, or too naive to fight back. They were wrong. At 9 o'clock the next morning, Jillian and I were sitting in the sleek downtown office of Sophia Williams, a family law attorney with a reputation for handling complex, high-conflict cases. Sophia was in her early 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She listened without interruption as I explained my situation, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished my story and showed her the screenshots I had taken of the text messages, she set her pen down deliberately. "What you've described, Lynn, is a clear case of fraud," Sophia said. "Marriage fraud specifically, and you're right to pursue this aggressively." "What are my options?" I asked. "Based on what you've shown me, we have grounds for an annulment rather than a divorce," she explained. An annulment legally declares that the marriage was never valid in the first place, which is precisely what we want to establish here. "What's the difference between that and divorce in practical terms?" Jillian asked. "A divorce ends a valid marriage. An annulment declares the marriage was never legally valid due to fraud, duress, or other specific circumstances. In this case, we'll argue fraud and lack of consummation, both of which are strongly supported by the evidence you have." I felt a small measure of relief, knowing there was a clear legal path forward. "How do we proceed?" "First, we file a petition for annulment with the court. We'll need to present evidence supporting our grounds, which includes the text messages you've shown me. We'll also need to establish that there was no consummation of the marriage, which Trevor's own messages confirm." "Will I need to testify about that?" I asked, feeling my cheeks warm at the thought of discussing such private matters in court. "Possibly, but the text messages are quite explicit about his strategy." "His own words may be enough," Sophia replied tactfully. "We should also consider whether you want to pursue additional civil claims for emotional distress and fraud." "I just want this marriage erased," I said firmly. "I want to be free of any legal connection to Trevor." "Understood. Let's focus on the annulment first." Sophia tapped her pen on the legal pad. "Be prepared, though. Once Trevor realizes you're taking legal action, he may become more aggressive or manipulative." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Trevor. I showed the screen to Sophia. "Don't answer," she advised. "From now on, all communication should go through me. We don't want to give him any opportunity to manipulate the narrative or pressure you into dropping the case." I declined the call and immediately received a text. "Please come home so we can talk about this. I can explain everything." "Classic manipulation tactic," Sophia observed. "He's trying to get you alone so he can control the situation. Don't engage." We spent the next hour going over the legal process, gathering the information Sophia needed, and developing a strategy. By the time we left her office, I had a clearer understanding of what lay ahead, and felt more empowered than I had in weeks. That sense of empowerment was tested almost immediately. Over the next few days, Trevor launched a campaign of manipulation that would have been impressive if it wasn't so disturbing. First came the pleading messages. "Please just talk to me, I love you. This is all a misunderstanding." When those went unanswered, his tone shifted to anger. "You're overreacting. You had no right to invade my privacy. No one will believe you." When I continued to ignore him, he changed tactics again, reaching out to mutual friends to paint me as unstable and paranoid. "I'm worried about Lynn," he told our friend Natalie. "She's making up these crazy accusations and refuses to come home. I think she might be having some kind of breakdown." Fortunately, I had already shared the truth, including screenshots of the texts with our closest friends. Most believed me and offered their support. A few remained uncertain, not wanting to take sides in what they perceived as a private marital dispute. And a small number, mostly Trevor's friends, from before our relationship sided with him. The most difficult part was explaining the situation to my parents. They had welcomed Trevor into our family, had been thrilled about our marriage. Telling them that it had all been a calculated fraud was one of the hardest conversations of my life. "I should have seen through him," my father said, his voice tight with anger. "None of us did, Dad," I assured him. He was very convincing. Meanwhile, Sophia and her team were building our case. The petition for annulment was filed with the court, and Trevor was formally served with papers 10 days after I discovered his scheme. His reaction was exactly as Sophia had predicted. First came a flurry of calls and messages, which I continued to ignore on her advice. Then, escalation. Trevor showed up at Jillian's apartment unannounced one evening, pounding on the door and demanding to speak with me. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave right now," Jillian told him through the door, phone in hand. "Tell Lynn. She's making a huge mistake," Trevor shouted. "Tell her to drop this ridiculous case before she embarrasses herself." Jillian did call the police, and Trevor left before they arrived, but the incident left me shaken. Sophia advised us to document everything and suggested I consider a temporary restraining order if Trevor's behavior continued to escalate. The most surprising development came 3 weeks after filing the annulment petition. Sophia called to inform me that Amanda, Trevor's ex-wife and co-conspirator, had contacted her office. "She wants to talk," Sophia explained. "Says she has information relevant to your case and is willing to provide sworn testimony." I was skeptical. Why would she turn on Trevor now? They seemed pretty unified in their scheme. "That's what we need to find out. I've arranged for her to come to my office tomorrow. Would you like to be present for the meeting?" I agreed, my curiosity outweighing my apprehension about facing one of the people who had plotted to defraud me. Amanda was not what I expected. Whereas Trevor projected confidence and charm, Amanda seemed nervous and subdued as she sat across from us in Sophia's conference room. She was slim with short brown hair and an expensive-looking watch that she kept fidgeting with. "I want to apologize for my role in what happened to you." She began, meeting my eyes briefly before looking down at her hands. "It was wrong and I regret being part of it." "Why are you coming forward now?" Sophia asked, her tone professionally neutral. Amanda sighed. "Because Trevor isn't just doing this to Lynn. This is a pattern. I wasn't actually his ex-wife when you met him, Lynn. We were still legally married." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "What?" "Trevor and I married 7 years ago. About 3 years into our marriage, he started this same pattern with another woman, Jessica. He pursued her, made her fall in love with him, married her while still married to me, then manufactured reasons to avoid consummating that marriage. His goal was to get access to her family money." "Bigamy," Sophia said, writing quickly on her pad. "That's a criminal offense." Amanda nodded. "Jessica discovered the truth before he could get to her money. She filed for annulment, but Trevor convinced her to keep quiet about the bigamy in exchange for not fighting the annulment. He can be very persuasive when he's desperate." "So you and Trevor stayed married," I said, trying to process this new information. "And then he did the same thing to me." "Yes. After Jessica, there were 2 others before you. Women with assets Trevor wanted access to. The plan was always the same: find a woman with money, charm her, marry her, avoid consummation to keep the annulment option open, then either divorce after establishing rights to marital assets or push for an annulment himself if things went wrong." "And you went along with this?" I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. Amanda looked ashamed. "Trevor can be very manipulative. He convinced me we were building a future together, that these were just temporary schemes to secure our financial stability. I know it's no excuse." "Why turn against him now?" Sophia pressed. "Because I finally realized he's been playing me too. I found messages between him and another woman. He's planning to leave me once he gets what he wants from you, Lynn. I'm just another pawn in his games." She pulled out her phone. "I have evidence of everything I've told you. Text messages, emails, bank statements showing how he's hidden money from previous schemes. I'm willing to testify to all of it." By the time Amanda left, Sophia was already revising our legal strategy. "This changes everything," she said, a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. "With Amanda's testimony and evidence, we not only have an ironclad annulment case, but Trevor could be facing criminal charges for bigamy and fraud." That evening, as I explained the latest developments to Jillian, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Lynn, it's Trevor," came the familiar voice, sounding uncharacteristically desperate. "We need to talk." My lawyer advised me not to speak with you directly. I said, my voice steady. I know Amanda went to your lawyer today, he said, ignoring my statement. Whatever she told you is a lie. She's unstable, always has been. Goodbye, Trevor. Wait, his voice rose in pitch. I'm willing to negotiate. I'll agree to the annulment. I won't contest anything. I'll sign whatever you want. Just drop the fraud allegations. Please, Lynn. I realized then that Trevor was scared. With Amanda turning against him and providing evidence of his pattern of fraud, he was facing not just the loss of his scheme but potential criminal charges. Talk to my lawyer, I said, and ended the call. The next day, Sophia informed me that Trevor's attorney had reached out with a settlement offer. Trevor would agree to an uncontested annulment on the grounds of fraud if I would agree not to pursue additional civil claims or provide evidence for potential criminal charges. What do you think I should do? I asked Sophia. She leaned back in her chair, considering. That's entirely your decision. The settlement would give you a clean break sooner without the stress of a contested court case. But it would also let Trevor potentially do this to someone else in the future. I thought about the women who had come before me, about Jessica, who had been silenced by Trevor's manipulation. I thought about the potential women who might come after me if Trevor wasn't stopped. No deal, I said firmly. We proceed with the full annulment case and provide all evidence to the prosecutor's office for potential criminal charges. I don't want another woman to go through what I experienced. Sophia nodded, a small smile of approval on her lips. I'll inform Trevor's attorney of your decision. The weeks leading up to our court date were a whirlwind of preparation. Sophia and her team worked tirelessly to build our case, gathering evidence not just from Amanda, but from Trevor's previous victims as well. Jessica, the woman Trevor had bigamously married before me, was initially hesitant to get involved, but eventually agreed to provide a written statement about her experience. Trevor, meanwhile, was growing increasingly desperate. His attempts to contact me became more frantic, alternating between pleading for forgiveness and making veiled threats about what might happen if I proceeded with the case. He knows he's cornered, Sophia explained when I showed her the latest messages. Men like Trevor aren't used to losing control of their narratives. It's making him unpredictable. To ensure my safety, I had moved from Jillian's apartment to a small sublet across town, my address known only to my closest family members and Sophia. I had also taken a temporary leave of absence from work, using accumulated vacation time to focus on the case and avoid potentially running into Trevor, who knew my office location. 2 weeks before our scheduled court date, Sophia called with news that changed the trajectory of our case entirely. Amanda's been doing some digging, she said, her voice animated with excitement. She found financial records Trevor had hidden from her. It turns out he has a serious gambling problem. Gambling? I repeated, surprised. Trevor had always seemed so financially responsible, often talking about investments and savings. Yes. Apparently he's been in significant debt for years. That's why he targets women with money. According to Amanda, his first marriage was legitimate, but when his gambling debts spiraled out of control, he turned to marriage fraud as a way to access funds. This new information filled in a crucial piece of the puzzle. Trevor's schemes weren't just about greed, they were driven by desperation. He needed continuous influxes of cash to cover gambling debts that kept mounting. There's more, Sophia continued. Amanda found evidence that Trevor took out a large loan just before your wedding using forged documents with your signature as collateral. What? How is that possible? I never signed anything like that. He likely used your signature from other documents, perhaps lease papers or joint account applications. The loan was for $50,000 from a private lender with connections to underground gambling operations. These aren't people who accept excuses for non-payment. The implications sent a chill down my spine. Is that why he's been so desperate to resolve this quietly? He's afraid of these people. It appears so. According to Amanda, Trevor was counting on accessing your trust fund to pay off this loan. With the annulment proceeding and his schemes exposed, he's in a dangerous position. This revelation cast Trevor's recent behavior in a new light. His increasingly erratic attempts to contact me, the desperation in his voice during our last phone call, his willingness to agree to an uncontested annulment, all made more sense now. He wasn't just trying to avoid legal consequences, he was trying to avoid the people he owed money to. We've forwarded this information to the detective handling the fraud investigation, Sophia said. They're taking it very seriously, especially the forged loan documents. That's a felony offense. The day after this conversation, Amanda contacted me directly for the first time. She had asked Sophia for my number and waited for approval before reaching out. I need to warn you, she said without preamble when I answered. Trevor is getting more unstable. He knows I've been helping your case, and he's been making threats. What kind of threats? I asked, my heart racing. He's saying he'll expose embarrassing information about both of us if we don't back off. He doesn't have anything real on me, but he's mentioned photos of you that you wouldn't want public. I don't know if he's bluffing, but I thought you should be prepared. I felt a moment of panic before realizing Trevor was grasping at straws. He doesn't have anything on me either. It's an empty threat. I figured as much. He's running out of options, Amanda said. Listen, I know it probably doesn't mean much coming from me, but I really am sorry for my role in all this. Seeing how far Trevor is willing to go has been a wake-up call. Why did you stay with him so long? I couldn't help asking. Amanda was quiet for a moment. It's complicated. At first, I believed we were building something together. By the time I realized the kind of person he really was, I felt too complicit to leave. And Trevor has a way of making you doubt yourself, making you feel like you need him. Her words resonated with my own experience, how quickly Trevor had made me question my perceptions and feelings during our brief marriage. What will you do after all this is over? I asked. Start over somewhere new. Testify against Trevor if it comes to that. Try to make amends in whatever way I can. She paused. What about you? I haven't thought that far ahead, I admitted. Right now, I'm just focused on getting this annulment and putting Trevor behind me. As our court date approached, Trevor made one last desperate attempt to sway me. He showed up at Jillian's apartment again, not realizing I no longer stayed there. Jillian called me immediately. He looks terrible, she reported. Unshaven clothes wrinkled completely different from the put-together guy we knew. He left a letter for you. Sophia advised against reading it, directly concerned it might contain manipulative language designed to make me doubt my decision. Instead, she had one of her assistants scan the letter and email it to her for review. It's mostly what we expected, she told me after reading it. Apologies, excuses, claims that he really did love you despite everything. But there's one interesting admission. He acknowledges the gambling debts and confirms he's being pressured by some dangerous people. Does that change anything for our case? I asked. If anything, it strengthens it. It's essentially a written confession of his motives. The day before our scheduled court appearance, Trevor's attorney contacted Sophia with a surprising update. Trevor had fled the state, leaving behind a signed affidavit admitting to the fraud and agreeing to the annulment. He had also included a typed confession detailing his pattern of marriage fraud, naming all previous victims, and admitting to the forged loan documents. Why would he do that? I asked, when Sophia called with the news. Why confess to everything now? My guess, he's running from the loan sharks, not the legal system. Prison might actually be safer for him than being on the streets owing money to those people. By confessing and implicating himself in multiple crimes, he might be hoping for protective custody. With Trevor's confession in hand, our court appearance the next day was brief and straightforward. The judge reviewed the evidence, including Trevor's signed affidavit, and granted the annulment on grounds of fraud. The marriage was declared null and void, as if it had never happened. As we left the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also lingering anger and sadness for what might have been if Trevor had been the person he pretended to be. "What happens now?" I asked Sophia, as we stood on the courthouse steps. "The criminal investigation continues. With Trevor's confession, charges will almost certainly be filed. They'll issue a warrant for his arrest if they haven't already." She placed a hand on my shoulder. "But that's no longer your concern, Lynn. Your part in this is over. You're free." Free. The word echoed in my mind as I walked down those steps, legally untethered from the man who had caused me so much pain. Free to start healing, to rebuild, to move forward. It wasn't the happy ending I had envisioned when I walked down the aisle 6 months earlier, but it was an ending I could live with. An ending that contained a new beginning. The morning of the court hearing had been nerve-wracking, despite Trevor's confession and absence. I had spent hours choosing the right outfit, something professional and dignified that would convey the seriousness of the situation. I settled on a navy blue pantsuit that made me feel strong and composed, even when my insides were churning with anxiety. Walking into the courtroom with Sophia beside me, I half expected to see Trevor there despite knowing he had fled. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed our case efficiently. With Trevor's signed confession and the mountain of evidence Sophia had compiled, the decision was straightforward. In less than 30 minutes, my marriage was declared null and void. I was no longer Mrs. Trevor Anderson. In the eyes of the law, I had never been. "Congratulations," Sophia said as we exited the courtroom. "How does it feel?" "Surreal," I admitted. 6 months ago, I was walking down the aisle certain I was beginning the happiest chapter of my life. Now, I'm walking out of a courtroom grateful to be legally severed from the same man. News of the annulment spread quickly through our social circle. Most people were supportive, expressing shock at Trevor's deception and offering sympathy for what I'd been through. A few, particularly those who only knew Trevor's side of the story, were less kind. There were whispers about what I might have done to drive him away, speculation that I was exaggerating his misdeeds to save face after a failed marriage. "Let them talk," Jillian advised when I mentioned hearing about these rumors. "Anyone who matters knows the truth." Trevor himself seemed to have vanished completely. According to Sophia, who stayed in touch with the detective handling the criminal case, he had last been seen crossing the border into Canada. There was a warrant out for his arrest on multiple charges, including fraud and forgery, but his whereabouts remained unknown. In the weeks following the annulment, I struggled with a complex mix of emotions. Relief was primary, certainly, but there was also anger, humiliation, and a profound sense of betrayal that colored everything. I found myself questioning my judgment, doubting my ability to recognize sincerity in others. How had I been so thoroughly deceived by someone I thought I knew intimately? "You need to talk to someone professional about this," my mother suggested during one of our weekly calls. "This kind of betrayal leaves scars." She was right. 2 weeks after the annulment was finalized, I started seeing Dr. Laura Parker, a therapist, specializing in trauma and trust issues. Our first session was difficult. I felt embarrassed, recounting how completely I had fallen for Trevor's deception. "What you experienced was psychological abuse," Dr. Parker said firmly. "Trevor systematically manipulated you, gaslit you when you questioned his behavior, and violated your trust in profound ways. Your emotional response is entirely normal and valid." Over the following months, our weekly sessions helped me process what had happened and begin to rebuild my sense of self. Dr. Parker introduced me to mindfulness techniques to manage anxiety and guided me through exercises designed to restore confidence in my own perceptions and judgments. "The goal isn't to never trust again," she explained. "It's to develop a healthier relationship with trust, one that includes appropriate boundaries and awareness of red flags, but still allows for vulnerability and connection." 6 months after the annulment, I felt strong enough to re-engage with aspects of my life that had been neglected during my relationship with Trevor. I reconnected with old friends he had subtly encouraged me to distance myself from. I realized with Dr. Parker's guidance that this isolation had been another of his manipulation tactics, making me more dependent on him and less likely to have outside perspectives on his behavior. I also threw myself back into my career with renewed focus. The marketing firm I worked for had been understanding during my personal crisis, allowing me flexible hours and a temporary reduction in responsibilities. Now, I was ready to take on new challenges, including a major campaign for an international client that required travel to New York and Chicago. "You seem different," my boss commented after I presented a particularly innovative concept to the client. "More confident, more willing to take risks." She was right. Surviving Trevor's betrayal had changed me. I was less concerned with pleasing everyone, more willing to trust my instincts, and more assertive about my needs and boundaries. These changes served me well professionally, leading to a promotion and increased responsibilities at the firm. My personal life took longer to rebuild. Dating seemed impossible for a long time. The thought of being vulnerable with someone new triggered anxiety and flashbacks to Trevor's deception. Dr. Parker encouraged me to take things slowly, to focus on building non-romantic connections first, and to practice setting and maintaining healthy boundaries in all relationships. A year after the annulment, I received an unexpected email from Jessica, one of Trevor's previous victims who had provided a statement for my case. "I heard he was finally arrested," she wrote. "Thought you might want to know." According to news reports, Jessica linked in her email Trevor had been apprehended trying to initiate a similar scheme with a wealthy widow in Toronto. His pattern had finally caught up with him. The Canadian authorities were cooperating with U.S. law enforcement to extradite him to face charges in multiple jurisdictions. The news brought a complicated sense of closure. There was satisfaction in knowing Trevor would face consequences for his actions, but also a lingering sadness for all the women he had hurt, including me. Jessica's email led to a coffee meeting, which led to a friendship I hadn't expected. There was something healing about connecting with someone who truly understood what I had experienced. We had both been targeted by the same predator, both deceived in similar ways, both left questioning our judgment and ability to trust. The hardest part for me was feeling so stupid, Jessica confided during one of our conversations. "I'm an educated woman. I run my own business. I consider myself perceptive. How did I not see through him?" "Because he was very, very good at what he did," I replied. "And because you're a good person who expects others to have basic human decency. That's not a flaw." Through my friendship with Jessica, I connected with a support group for survivors of relationship fraud. Hearing others' stories helped diminish my shame and isolation. I wasn't alone in having been deceived, and I wasn't uniquely gullible or naive for having believed in someone who turned out to be a skilled manipulator. 18 months after the annulment, I felt ready to consider dating again. My first attempt was a disaster. A coffee date where I found myself interrogating the poor man about his financial situation and previous relationships until he made an excuse to leave early. But with time and practice, it got easier. I met Daniel at a charity event organized by my firm. He was a graphic designer who had recently relocated to Seattle from Portland. Our connection developed slowly, built on shared interests and values, rather than the whirlwind romance Trevor had orchestrated. When I finally felt comfortable enough to tell Daniel about my experience with Trevor, his response was compassionate and understanding. "Thank you for trusting me enough to share that," he said simply. "I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for you." 2 years after the annulment, I found myself in a healthy, balanced relationship with Daniel. We took things at a pace that felt comfortable for both of us, with clear communication about expectations and boundaries. I still attended therapy regularly, still had moments of doubt and fear, but they no longer controlled my life or my choices. The most unexpected outcome of my experience with Trevor was how it ultimately led me to a deeper understanding of myself. Through the process of healing, I discovered strengths I hadn't known I possessed, clarified my values and priorities, and developed a more authentic relationship with myself and others. In retrospect, I realized that Trevor's betrayal, while painful beyond words, had forced me to confront patterns and tendencies that had made me vulnerable to his manipulation. My desire to see the best in others, my willingness to excuse red flags, my tendency to prioritize others' needs above my own, all had contributed to the situation. Through therapy and self-reflection, I learned to balance my natural empathy and openness with healthier boundaries and more discernment. I learned that true love and connection are built on honesty, mutual respect, and consistent behavior, not grand gestures or intense emotions. The woman I am today is stronger, wiser, and more authentic than the woman who walked down the aisle 3 years ago. The pain Trevor caused was real and significant, but it did not define or destroy me. Instead, it became part of my story, a chapter that tested me but ultimately led to growth and deeper self-understanding. If there's one lesson I've learned from this experience, it's this: true healing comes not from forgetting the past or pretending it didn't hurt, but from integrating it into your life story in a way that allows you to move forward with wisdom and hope. The scars remain, but they are evidence of your resilience, not your weakness. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to unexpected growth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after profound betrayal. Thank you for listening, and remember that your worth is never determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to rise after falling.